What a day, what a day, what a week. 2 podcasts this week. Feeling busy. Welcome back. Nice to see you. I'm Dean. Joining me on the program today. Let's just get to it. I don't like wasting time. Hate wasting time. You can get more things. You can't get more time. Please welcome to the program, journalist and all around Lothario, Dave Moscrop, ladies and gentlemen. David Moscrop. Nice to see you.
Bio.
Yeah, nice to see you. I was going through your wiki page today. Did you know that you have a wiki page? Did you know that?
Yeah, I found that out several months ago when I was looking for something about my book. And
Too Dumb for Democracy?
Too Dumb for Democracy, now in audiobook format too. And I also learned that Google knows my age. Like it popped up.
Is it accurate?
It is accurate. Yeah,
okay.
it is accurate.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, good, because next time I forget my age, I can just Google it. The years ago, one time I woke up in the middle of the night. It was something like 4 in the morning, and I don't know if I was hungover or what. And I Googled, I like strolled over to my computer, eyes half closed, and Googled, what time is it? I have the photo still. And just like, I woke up the next day and saw the photo. Just like,
you Google what time it was? You didn't want to just stare at the
well, I wasn't thinking that way, but now, I mean, now Google doesn't just know the time; it knows how old I am, and
yeah, dude, it's crazy how like your Wikipedia page is strong. Mine's terrible. Mine's like when someone at Wiki hates my guts. I'm not too sure.
I want to know who did it. I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there saying, "Oh, he did it himself." I promise you, I do not have that much time on my hands.
Well, it's a small wiki page.
Yeah,
Moscrop. Like
if I had done it, it would have been way bigger.
Oh yeah, it would have been full of fallacies too. Probably if I'd done
6'4", 220.
5.2% body fat.
Yeah.
Starting
linebacker at the University of Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. Thought you're going CFL.
No, we're going pro, college ball, not CFL.
I take issue with your Wikipedia page.
What's wrong with it?
Well, it starts with like something that David Moscrop is a Canadian podcaster, political scientist, columnist, and the author of a book. I mean,
this all looks true.
Yeah, it's true, but are you like, is that what you would lead with if someone was talking to you? Like Dave Moscrop is a Canadian podcaster. Would you say, hi, Canadian podcaster, David Moscrop?
Homeowner.
Public transit taker.
Yeah, actually, I rode the transit yesterday. It worked in Ottawa, which is a big day for us.
Yeah, it is. But this is like your Wikipedia pages. It starts with like the thing that nobody needs to be qualified for.
Yeah, that's true.
And you got a PhD.
David Moscrop, bather, shaver, microwaver.
Yeah, walker.
Midnight toker. Yeah.
Anything in a Steve Miller song. Yeah, I took offense for you to that. I'm like, oh, no one needs to be qualified for that, for Christ's sake. Political scientist, you are. Columnist, you are. Globe and Mail, Washington Post, a number of other magazines as well, online publications.
Except for the Toronto Star. For some reason, I've never written for the Toronto Star, which seems like a weird thing.
Really?
It's the one. I think I tried once, like 10 years ago. But that's the one place I haven't written for. So hit me up, guys. Let's complete the beer run here.
Yeah, like $25 an article at the Star. They're really paying.
Yeah, but it only takes me 3 minutes to write one.
Yeah, so. I know. For them, take you 2 to write for the Sun. Please tell me you've never written for them either.
No, I've never written for the Sun.
That's good.
I've never written for the Sun. But the National Post. When I was starting, I wrote for the National Post a bunch.
Did you really?
And it was great. Yeah, I mean, this was quite a long time ago. I had a great time writing for them.
But that was when the media was like media, right? Like you were like, oh, well, these are outlets. These are media outlets. They're trusted, venerable outlets. Like that went bye-bye a long time ago, David. And you as a journalist, like a real journalist with like a doctorate, you got your PhD in this stuff. How do you look at what's that?
And I'm doing a media ethics course this fall at Carleton.
Those exist?
And let me tell you. Oh yeah. And Carleton's a hell of a journalism school, but let me tell you, there's some material out there for this.
Is there? Like right now?
Every day, I'm just going through the news or going through Twitter.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, that's going on the syllabus. The syllabus is going to be 400 pages long.
for
I'm not
the
gonna be able to fit it on this bookshelf. I don't
let's talk about that because like you're one of the few. I call you a lodestar. I know it sounds
Sure.
like the name of a dirty movie, but it isn't.
Or a Texas country band.
That's true. Um, you're one of the lodestars that I follow yourself. There are a couple other journalists, Mr. Adler, obviously, who works with us here at Crier Media. People that advocate for humanity, right? And very rarely do you see that in media because people's paychecks are obviously attached to whatever narrative they're told to drive. Where do you put like calling yourself a journalist in 2023, knowing how journalism is done in 2023?
It took me a long time to call myself anything. I was always very hesitant to want to say, well, I'm an academic, I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, because it felt like, well, look at all these people out there who are doing it. And I feel like they're the real deal. And I'm just this upstart. And then you start looking around and saying, oh, no, 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 no. If these folks can do it, I definitely can, because there's just a class of grifter out there. And so here's how I think the fundamental tension is. Journalism used to be heavily gate kept, for better or for worse, and there were a bunch of things that came with that weren't so good. It was tough to get in for a lot of people. It was white, it was male, it was ideologically very, very narrow.
Depending on
And
the outlet.
yeah, even the outlets had, a little bit of leeway left, right, a little, but they were all fundamentally similar, especially in the kind of like golden era of broadcast news. They played it down the middle. And the internet, first cable television, but later the internet really tore things apart. It really opened up the space. And it allowed a lot more people in. It allowed a lot more diversity, including ideological diversity. But it also allowed a bunch of grifter chuds to come along with their iPhone that they would stick in someone's face, or a Google connection that let them rewrite press releases based on conspiracy theories, and they would call themselves journalists. And as cynical political folks started picking them up as little puppets, they became accredited and they got access. And now all of a sudden there's this class of quote unquote journalists who are conspiracy theorists and stenographers for their political parties. And it's a real discredit to the field. I will say real quickly, the origins of newspapers in much of North America were like expressly partisan newspapers. That was not like a new thing. Political newspapers used to be arms of political parties in some case, like the Globe Mail, which has its roots in the Liberal Party, way back. But this is a new level of journalism grifter, and it's awful for the profession, especially in an era where people are like, I don't know who to believe, just whoever yells the loudest, I guess.
Well, and that's like the one thing, you hear people say today is like, who do I believe? Like, what am I supposed to do? And, it kind of, I go back between, now specifically media, because we're one of those young upstart companies that just kind of grabbed our iPhones and started doing shit, right? Like we are that group. But I think that we feel a sense of accountability to telling the truth, because I came from that time. I'm a little bit older than you, but I came from that time when you trusted what was on television. And then now, and you trusted what you read in the news by and large, but you would side with a bias. And you could tell, one story would have two different angles depending on where you read it from. But you would just look at that as being well-rounded by reading all of those aspects of that story, right? It's very different now. It's not that you're getting two sides to the same news story. You're getting two narratives that are being delivered to you for a purpose in media. That's how I feel that is. And so now and that's, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is what media is today.
I mean, there are good outlets for sure. There are good outlets who play it straight and great reporters who do great work, but there are a bunch of expressly political, for again, not equally chuddy. There are some who are far worse than others.
Yeah.
Some whose aims are far more nefarious than others. But the space has been flooded with people whose express goal it is to tear down X, Y, or Z, and they don't really care what's true.
Give me examples, because I bet you we have similar examples.
Well, let me just say,
you're an academic and you got your doctorate. So if my examples line up with your examples, I'm like, hey, I guess I'm a doctor too.
Well, I would just say there are I'm trying not to pick individual fights right now for the simple reason that
I'll do it. Tell me who they are. Just text me.
I'll text you my shit list and
Yeah,
just like
text me
go
your shit
down.
list of asshole
Well,
journalists.
let me start. Let me start with the flip side of it. Let me start with the flip side of it. I'm practicing to be a politician. Uh, you look at the space and you look at outlets that are new, often independent,
Yeah,
shoestring budget, or maybe a bigger budget, but they're out there grinding and doing really good work. The Narwhal that's been holding Doug Ford's feet to the fire on the
yeah,
Greenbelt scandal, outstanding outlet. The Trillium's doing great work. The Logic is doing great specific work on tech stuff. A lot of these folks are lefties, but you know, of course, that's what I would say that, wouldn't I? The Tyee has been kind of an independent staple out of British Columbia for a very, very long time.
mhm.
But there's a bunch of these places that are out there doing really, really good work. And it's encouraging because it means, you know, Canada Land often does good work, but it means like through in the rubble, there are these green shoots that are popping up. And then on the other side, you get like True North,
Rebel,
that Rebel. I
post
derive. Let
millennial.
me just say this: I derive
Yeah,
nothing of value for any of these places, and I would think that we would be better off if they weren't around. Um, and I think there's often a false equivalency made between the right wing outlets and the left wing outlets, as if Ricochet on the left is the same thing as True North on the right, which it isn't. Ricochet does very, very good work. I do not believe True North does very, very good work.
no, I do not believe they're actually even a news outlet. They're just a lobby group parading around as a news outlet full of people that like to shovel money and like mailing lists and subscription lists to people. It's Candace Malcolm is who that
I
is.
mean, they
So
have a
I'll pick
project.
that fight.
They
I'll
have a
pick.
project. They have a project, right? And
Yeah,
I think it's not a new thing to have an expressly political project as an outlet. Lots of places do. I think it's a deeply problematic project. I don't think I've ever agreed with a single thing I've seen come out of there. I don't think
why?
it's
Why?
particularly
Because you know
talented.
what they would say to you, David, right? Like when I say they, I mean readers of those outlets. What they would say to you is like, you don't like our opinion. You don't like the alternative opinion. So how do you
No, I don't.
qualify why they are incredibly dangerous, which I happen to agree with?
Well, I spent a lot of time talking to conservatives and paying attention to conservatives for a couple of reasons. One,
It's hilarious.
you got to know what's you got to know what the other side is thinking.
Yeah,
Uh, so I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Occasionally, I think they're right about things, and I agree with them. Some of them I overlap with on government failures on housing, government failures on transit. At least you know the critiques, if not the remedies.
hmm
There are folks in conservative politics I count as friends, and I learn quite a bit from. Even though at the end of the day, look, I'm a socialist, and that's what's most important for me, and I think I'm right about that. And I think market conservatives are wrong by and large, but there's a kind of responsible, smart group of conservatives, and it's fashionable on the internet to say, you know, every conservative is a chud loon. That's not true. I spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff,
Well, it's
and
super ambiguous, right? It's that big brush you paint with, and I know some actually very decent, human-minded
yeah,
conservatives,
smart
right?
people.
Yeah, yeah.
But the kinds who rise to prominence and get the most airtime right now are not those people,
Mm.
right? The ones the algorithm loves, the ones who are chasing subscriptions, are not those people. They're the loony extremists who don't know what the fuck they're talking about, who you would think, well, they must be fringe types. But are they fringe types when the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, shows up at some woman's driveway and calls Pierre Trudeau and Justin Trudeau Marxists?
Mm.
Or when Jordan Peterson starts writing in a haiku about cultural Marxism or God knows what else, and every kind of thirsty conservative who wants some clicks lines up to say, yes, sir, masterful, well played. I'm an independent thinker, not a bootlicker. Now, if you could please just pass me your boot for a second, I want to give it a quick little touch with my tongue. You know what I mean? And so that becomes the dominant narrative and the
Yeah,
dominant you know, source of attention for conservatives, and it discredits the whole movement. But it's good for business for a lot of them. So
sure.
this is what they flock to, because you know what, you know, as a sort of Sinclair Lewis said, and I'm paraphrasing, it's very hard to get a man to understand something when his job depends on him not understanding it.
Oh, fuck yeah. That is such a great. I'm a big quote guy. I think the older I get, the more I look at bumper stickers and those quotes. You know, the calendar, it's got the quote. You turn it over, new quote every day. These new quotes all come from philosophy. And now I'm a big quote guy where I'm like, my God, that quote, like I used to make fun of it when I was a kid, but it's all true, right? Like it's all true. To your point, you know, there are people doing good work though, you know, like and they do work for major outlets. And I think probably watching what has transpired over the past couple of weeks around the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, and his government being investigated by the RCMP for this. I like how they call it a land swap, for this giveaway of protected land called the Greenbelt. If you Google Greenbelt scandal, Doug Ford Greenbelt, everybody just bringing you along for the ride, you'll be able to see what we're talking about. Now, for the last 5.5, 6 years, how long has Mr. Ford and the Conservative government been in power in Ontario? 6 years.
2018. So yeah,
6 years. Going on 6 years. We have seen some pretty brazen bullshit from this government. We have seen insider trading, cronyism, dealing with individuals, nepotism at a rate I've never seen before, collusion with National Post media, et cetera, when it comes to news and stories. Now I'm seeing, and you know what, we didn't hear anything. Like, you know, guys like you and I and a few other people online will be like, hey, that's wrong. Hey, that's wrong. Hey, that's terrible. Hey. And then this Greenbelt scandal erupted. And now, and I think we're seeing it for a reason. And I'm like, I don't trust anybody in media anymore, but we're seeing some incredible work being done by people that work for mainstream media outlets.
Right.
You know, Colin DeMello, he's one of the gentlemen. Siobhan Morris, she's done an incredible job. The folks that you mentioned at Narwhal, like we're starting to see not just a little bit of pushback. I'll put an example of it on the screen for everybody so you can watch it. We're starting to see people like do their jobs, and now I'm starting to wonder what the mix is, like what happened, why we didn't get this for the last 6 years, where the accountability was. And I'll play this clip and then we'll get there. This is Doug Ford being challenged by Colin DeMello, who does a great job, asking him why this whole process around giving 8.3 billion, which by the way looks and sounds like it might be around 20 billion according to market value, 8.3 billion in protected land to 15 developer friends of his that also blessed him at daughters' weddings, gave him fucking pockets full of money, all that stuff, which we all know about from the Stag and Doe. But this was a highly irregular process, number one. Number two, the RCMP are investigating. So this is legitimate, but we should have been asking questions a long time ago. Anyway, here's the clip. We'll watch it, then we'll talk about it together.
Report is nothing but incompetence, right? From the chief of staff who decided to rush through a process, to the housing minister who looked away because he thought it was going to be too politically sensitive, to a premier who directed his housing minister to open up the Greenbelt after promising Ontarians that you would never touch the Greenbelt. But Premier, okay. At what point do you take personal responsibility here, and how are people to have trust in your leadership?
Well, thank you for that, Colin, and I'm sure you just walked down the street from your home, that you have a home. But do you know how many people don't have a home, Colin? There's hundreds, there's hundreds of thousands of people that there's hundreds of thousands of people that don't have homes. And yes, 2018, we didn't have a housing crisis. Do you know why we didn't have a housing crisis, Colin? Because there was no jobs here. People weren't coming here. Because the last government lost 300,000 jobs. There was no interest in coming to Ontario. But now, since we've been in office, we've created an environment and condition for people around the world to come to Ontario. Let me finish, Colin. To come to Ontario. When we have a housing crisis, I have two options, Colin. I sit back like the other government did and let the whole province fall apart, or we move forward and we build homes. Because I know you, Colin, a year down the road, if we don't have the homes, you're the first person that's going to be up here saying, why didn't you build the homes? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Well, Colin, guess what? We're going to build homes. We're going to build homes until people have the same opportunity that you have. You have a nice home down the street. But guess what? There's hundreds of thousands of people that don't have your opportunity, that don't have the good paying job that you have. That's the difference.
Hi, Premier.
I believe they call that unhinged.
I don't know if he ever played poker. I used to play poker occasionally, and I spent a couple of summers playing poker, and we
Yeah.
call that tilt.
Yeah, full tilt. You tweeted that yesterday. He's on tilt. Keep
Yeah,
going because and
it's
you could
bad
see
news.
him. Did you see him start to quiver at the end because he was getting angry? Because someone was like, "Hey, there's a word I'd like you to define for me in a conversation. It's called accountability. Can you do it?" And he's like, "Nah."
I would also like to know how much he thinks a journalist makes.
Not a lot.
Right? He's like, yo, you got a great paying job and a big house down the road, which is a weird swipe to take.
Well, if
But
you understand Doug's Doug's family history, which we can get into if you like, he's got no problem launching this veiled, "Hey, I know where you live" threat.
Right.
Like he's got no problem. That's what I took out of that.
yeah. Yeah, it's thuggish and that's consistent. But let's start with this.
Okay.
The job one of a journalist, I think, is to tell the truth. And sometimes journalists have that responsibility beaten out of them because they're like, well, if I tell the truth, and especially if I tell the truth in a plain way, people will think I'm biased. Doug Ford is an idiot. Doug Ford is a stupid man. He's not smart. He's not smart. He's a turnip. And we have to start from that premise. And I think he kind of listens to the last person who talked to him. I don't think there's a there. But there's people around him who are pretty smart. And I think this is where we get a lot of our problems, because I don't think fundamentally like Doug Ford is out to destroy Ontario, but I think he's just so incompetent and so stupid that he's become a cipher for other people's interests. And he's also very sensitive, obviously. And so he then becomes kind of nasty and intransigent when things go sideways, which they often do because he's running an incompetent government as an incompetent person. And now he's really caught it with the green belt and it's sticking. And the press gallery has come alive. They're Frampton, they have come alive. And
I don't know. We've had a Frampton reference in a political conversation, so thank you.
My pleasure. I went through a big Frampton period in high school.
I'm still in
Frampton
that
comes
Frampton
alive.
period.
I was just like, oh my God.
You got mailed that in the suburbs.
And it's but the press gallery has come alive.
Yeah.
And they're digging and they're pressing and they're energized and they've got something here and it's sticking and it's resonating with people. The polls are suggesting it. And that's a hell of a moment for them. And I think you're going to see them do their best work now because it's a tough gig and it's very dispiriting and exhausting. And they went through the same pandemic we did, in some ways worse because the industry is falling apart and everyone's worried about losing their job, worse than some. I mean, the industries are falling apart. Lots of people are losing their jobs. But having to be at that front line every day and just watch politicians bullshit you, let me tell you, that is deeply dispiriting. You're like crying fire in a crowded room because there is a metaphorical fire.
But you
like,
talk about dispiriting on one level, having to sit there and eat shit in a press conference when you're like, go cover this and ask him questions. But how dispiriting is it when you are told, and I know this happens, and this happens as a journalist, when you're told by your employer, these are your questions.
Oh yeah. Or you're worried about losing access, right? And this is a big challenge for political journalists, especially those on at Queen's Park or on the Hill in Ottawa or wherever it might be. If you lose access to sources, if you can't get in the building, if you're worried about losing your capacity to write. And we see now the Conservative Party isn't accrediting a bunch of media outlets, including the Narwhal, for their upcoming convention. That's not an accident, right? And so you start to think, well, I can't do my job, and so you have to kind of try to be a little bit more restrained. I don't have to do that. I don't face the same challenges they do because I'm a different kind of journalist. I'm an opinion writer. I'm expressly political. I have no problem taking a position and being ideological. I'm allowed to do that. In fact, that's part of my job. I don't need access to these folks, and I don't want it, quite frankly. I talk to experts. I talk to other people. I talk to real people who are doing real work, not politicians out spouting partisan lines. So I have that privilege. So I can turn around and say, this is an incompetent, crooked government, and they ought to be sent the way of the Carolina parakeet. You know what I mean? And anyone with two eyes and the better part of a cerebral cortex can say, yeah, they got to go. They're crooked. And that's the conclusion we reach. But the Queen's Park journalists who have to play it straight are getting pretty close to being able to say that because the Auditor General's saying it, the Integrity Commissioner's saying it, so they can turn around and say, "Well, that's not me saying it. It's your own officers of Parliament who are saying it because they've investigated your crooked government, and it'll be the police next." And so that really fires them up because it gives them an opening, and that's where they're at their best. And I will say, this is a really important point to make. I couldn't do my job though if they didn't do theirs. I'm swimming in their wake because this is where I'm getting the stuff that allows me to say the things that I say. And the Greenbelt thing, for instance, was broken in large part thanks to the narwhal.
Yeah.
You know, you got Emma and McIntosh, Fatima Syed out there like busting their ass to get this stuff out. It makes a difference.
Emma's been incredible, and the narwhal has done an unbelievable job,
Big time.
sticking to, you know, the truth or the facts as we know them, right, and kind of presenting them when nobody else did. So, you know, that's the question I would ask is like, and you bring up a great point. I swim in the wake of people doing real work as well, right? We all do. If you're an opinion person, a commentary person, you got a podcast, that, you know, and I think it's worth saying that there are really good people who are still doing the business of reporting in media in this country, right?
Big time. And I as a journalist, spend a lot of time reading them. I try to boost them. I cite them whenever I'm writing. This is the thing. Some outlets and some writers don't do this. When I write a piece, do a podcast, I'm constantly citing my colleagues directly and indirectly. Directly through naming them, indirectly through linking, and often both. Right, because it's important that we give credit for people's work, and some outlets are very weird about doing this because they're competitive. I'm not competitive like that. I don't care. My job is just to say what I think is true based on the evidence that I have, and I'm certainly citing the people who I'm getting information from. But it's encouraging to see that, and there is some hope for media. It's a really, really tough time, and there's a lot of nasty stuff out there, and there's a lot of reasons to be deeply depressed about it. But then these green shoots pop up, and there's a lot of hope. And the Greenbelt moment has really given me a lot of hope for at least media in Ontario. They've really come alive, and contrast that with, I think, the last election in Ontario, where the coverage I don't think was as strong as it is now.
Yeah, no, you're right. It wasn't, and I think that was for a number of reasons, and everything's cyclical, right? I think if people are doing bad things, you're going to get caught doing bad things at some point. Like it's just kind of, you know, cause and effect. It's consequence, right? Every decision has one. Everything has a tax. The tax that Doug Ford is currently paying politically, and in terms of public relations, is the tax that are bases on his decisions and his decisions alone in his government. Which, you know, the details of this Greenbelt thing, back to the Greenbelt, not just concerning. This is, you know, you and I've watched you do it to a much greater extent because I have like a shelf life when it comes to talking about political stuff. I know it's your bag, it's your deal, it's your living, it's what you do. You're a doctor, so I swim in your wake a little bit. But here's the thing, is that, you know, what we're seeing, according to the letter of the law, as an old guy, people used to get arrested for insider trading, cronyism, what has been alleged in the Auditor General's report, the ethics committee that just delivered a stunning verdict that, hey, this is not only unethical, you broke ethics laws, you broke laws. Now, I come from a time and a place, and I said this on Twitter the other day, where, you know, if a politician broke laws, they got in trouble. Like we're watching Donald Trump, which is hilarious, by the way. He got indicted. He got a mugshot. Like he's going to court. Like he pled not guilty in Georgia yesterday. And we know how difficult it is for elites to be accountable there. What is it here about this process that has prevented Doug Ford, in your mind, from being accountable to the idea, which apparently the AG bore out in her report, Bonnie Lysyk, the idea that, yeah, this was not only a terrible thing, not only did you basically swipe this land and give it to mega donors and friends and people that went to your stag party where your daughter got blessed with envelopes full of cash in your wedding and they sat next to you, developers, people you're putting on police boards. I mean, it is like, and I said this the other day, like, to understand Doug Ford, you can't read a political and his government and the people around it. You cannot read a political science book. You got to read Puzo's The Godfather.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I called him Vito Ford Leone.
I saw that.
Ford Leone. And that's the vibe you get. I mean, the first thing to understand is that they're, I think, unrelated to the Greenbelt, in just a broader point, I think we need to lock up more crooked politicians. And that starts with having more stringent and punitive laws around political corruption. And part of the problem is that in this country, we don't have laws that hold politicians to account to the extent they ought to be held to account. And I think part of that is that because guess who makes the laws?
Politicians?
You know, it's like if I come over to your place, I'm like, okay, Dean, we're gonna talk about some ways to hold you to account. I'm gonna
Yeah.
let you set those rules, obviously, because who better to decide what the rules should be than the person affected by the rules?
Oh, it's the
Obviously.
old Pablo Escobar sentencing,
Yeah.
right? It's the same thing. Hey, listen, you're going to go to jail, but you get to build the jail and you
Yeah.
get to decide how the jail works. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Like this is why we let murderers design criminal law. Do you have a different idea? Is there a better way? But part of it is a lot of what's being done doesn't, for instance, well, we'll find out. But in the Greenbelt case, as of right now, there's no finding that a criminal law has been broken. The integrity commissioner said that the Members Integrity Act, which is a law, was violated, so there has been a broken law. According to the integrity commissioner, but not a criminal law. Criminal law, first of all, is federal. This is why we have the police investigating. We have the RCMP investigating because the OPP didn't want there to be even an appearance of being captured or biased, which I gotta say for them, smart move. Smart move.
No, but did you not shock you a little bit? Because one of the narratives that I saw, and I love Twitter for that, or X, whatever the fuck you want to call it today, is one of the narratives that was buzzing around, and I thought it was funny, was like, hey, what does it say when the OPP, the second that an investigation needs to be done around Doug Ford, they're like, hey, yeah, we're totally complicit to some extent. We're out.
Well, I mean, my initial reaction was, okay, this is a good move, smart, but it says a lot and nothing good about the fact that you needed to make it. Right.
Yeah.
The fact that they realized that they had to make this move because like this is your job. This is
Yeah.
really specifically what you're meant to do. And if you're saying, well, we can't do our job because people aren't going to trust us to not be crooked, investigating this crooked government, I'm like, it's just crooked people all the way down.
Yeah.
But so we need to there need to be much harsher punishments for significant violations of public trust, which I think is what we have with the Ford government. It's a public trust violation because if we distill the Greenbelt issue down to its base, it's this. The public has an interest in getting houses built and the environment protected. There's a process in place to plan and develop. It's called the Planning Act. It's very appropriately named. You could look it up, Doug. It's very easy to find.
It's not just a coincidence that it's called the Planning Act?
Coincidence. It's not the Zoological Society Act.
Yeah. Like those lobby groups that have like names like IDU.
Or People for a Better Tomorrow, and it's just like
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
bunch
yeah.
of fascists.
Democracy Today.
And there's a planning act, and they didn't follow that. Instead, an office, the housing minister's office, unbeknownst allegedly to the housing minister, why would he pay attention to it? And to the premier, who's very busy doing figuring out how to use a laptop, taking the skidoo out for a rip, lets the chief of staff run a process to hand the right to develop over to a bunch of developer buddies of the Ford government who now stand to make billions, maybe tens of billions of dollars. And that's a corrupt process. The process was corrupt. And that's a violation of public trust and the public good. And the government, Ford and Clark, even admit that the process was flawed. But then they turn around and say, well, the buck stops with us and the process was flawed. Okay, well, great, thanks. What are you going to do?
Quitting, right?
We're just going to keep doing it. Oh, so you're going to go back and redo the process at least because it was flawed. Like, oh no, it's not. It's flawed, but it worked.
We're already here
because
We're already
our
here.
buddy's got all this land. It's true. Of course, it's flawed, but it worked, right? And land, by the way, that Ford's own government says was unnecessary to develop to meet the province's housing goals.
Yeah.
So there's a whole mix, I think. I actually believe that there's a level of incompetence here rather than corruption at work, that these people are just so stupid that they weren't aware of what was going on under their nose. But that doesn't mean there isn't a different form of corruption, which is a process that went against the public norms and the Planning Act, and produced an outcome that was fundamentally unjust and inconsistent with the public good. That's a form of corruption. And so at the very least, Clark should go. Ford should go too. The process should be revisited. The deal should be suspended in the meantime. And I think the police are going to be digging real hard and real deep. And this isn't the end of that. We've got the AG report. We've got the Integrity Commissioner report. That's not going to be the end of it. I actually do think we're going to get some accountability at the end of the day. I do think. I think Clark's going to go. I think they're going to wear this around their neck for some time. It's going to start dragging them in the polls. Remember, it wasn't long ago that the chief of staff, Ryan Amato, wasn't going to go. Ford was stepping in saying, no, he's got to stay. He's a good kid. He and I went to Timmy's.
The Godfather. No, he's staying around. He's my boy.
And then he's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
and good for him. Like that was the right call. And I think eventually Clark's going to be hounded into leaving too. But I don't know what though, right? Then he gets replaced by
another sycophant, another buddy. Yeah. Like maybe Michael Ford takes that over because he's his nephew. I mean, it is like, it's wild to watch. Like, even that whole thing, if you understand anything about the Ford family history, right? The books that have been written, Crazy Town, Robin Doolittle. There's another book that was written recently about the Ford family. And what amazes me, I think to this day, is like we've all heard the stories about the Fords. Like we've read the reports, the police reports called to their house, the crack smoking mayor brother who passed away a number of years ago. By the way, one of his last tweets was shit posting me. I don't know if you even know that from the hospital.
Nice.
Oh yeah. Totally shit posted me, and then he died a couple days later. I'm like, that was fun.
Oh.
I know, it's sad.
So you got him.
Well, I didn't. Poor health did. And that's a shame. Yeah. But I will say this, is that the history around this family, and it amazes me that anybody voted for him in the first place, because like it's one of the most well-known secrets is that he's from a family that is under a lot of suspicion for a lot of things over the years, right? Like it's not just him. I know guys that bought hash from him back in the day, which, don't sleep on hash. It's not a terrible thing. I'm a fan.
I mean, that's the least of my critiques.
Exactly.
For I'm like,
But like, yeah, I know. You're like, whatever. Good
I wish
he'd
stayed a dealer.
Hey, I heard he had some great Afghan.
I mean, like if he was a dealer, I think he would have been a great deal. He should have, if that was what he was doing, he should have kept doing it.
Yeah, but now you watch the same way that he was brought up, and if you know anything about his dad, and if you know anything about his family, the thing that shocks me is that people are shocked. Like the thing that shocks me is that we're here, talking about all of his dad's former friends and now his friends being developers, and the OPP excusing themselves. Ron Taverner, who's like Doug Ford's best friend, he used to be the family fixer for years and years and years, was involved in the OPP. And I'm like, dude, it's all in plain sight. Like, why is everybody here surprised? Did you just think because you had enough of McGinty, and that's a whole other issue of illegality, which we can talk about? But is it just because you were so sick of the liberals, you're like, hey, let's just give this guy another shot? Like, I think he's an idiot, but I think he's surrounded himself with people who have absolutely terrible fucking motives for this province and the people in it, who don't care about the quality of character, right? And I think Max Fawcett said it best in a podcast with us a long time ago. I'm like, how is it that anybody can vote for anyone like that? And he goes, we don't all share the same values, right?
And that's definitely true. And some people are willing to believe the bullshit. They don't know better. They don't have time to dig into everything because they're just trying to get through the day, right? I mean, you walk around, spend time outside, go to shops, talk to people. They're trying to get through the day. They're trying to pay rent. They're trying to pay their mortgage. They're trying to pay their tuition. They're trying to get their car fixed. They're trying to, go to a restaurant once a week if they can even feed themselves the other 6 days. And they're worried about absolutely everything because the walls are closing in. So they're not like dialed into the news 24/7, and bless their hearts. I mean, they can't be. Yeah. And this is a critique I've been raising for a long time. We have all of these rights as citizens in a democracy, but functionally we can't practice a huge part of them because we can't afford to. We literally cannot afford to. So we've effectively truncated the citizenship of a significant part of this province and this country and this world, because we have formal rights but not actual rights because we don't have the resources to practice them. And that's an utter scandal. And so crooked politicians and crooked governments thrive in environments, and incompetent ones thrive in environments like this because they're not held to account, because
People are
people are
too
trying to
busy.
get through the day.
Yeah, we're too busy trying to make it work. Right?
And people get so pissed off, they're just like, I don't even give a shit. Just whoever's next, come on in.
Yeah.
And that's how you move from one government to the next. And it's what's going to happen with Poilievre and Trudeau. I think at some point people are going to be like, we're just so sick of this government. It's not fixing our problems. The housing crisis is worse. Prices are higher. Everything's on fire, literally or figuratively. Just let the next guy go. And they can't pay attention to the fact that the next guy is going to screw them so hard they won't know what hit them. But then they'll drop him in 4, 6, 8 years, and we'll do it again.
Why are we like this? What happened? And I get the pandemic being what it was. Everybody's taxed, right? Mentally taxed, and I think that's a fucking great explanation, David. Because I feel it, like you feel it probably. I've seen you tweet like, "Fuck, for the love of God, can I just stop tweeting about politics for one day?" I've watched you take breaks from social media. I had to take. I had to take a break from social media this summer. I had to take a break from like commentary, and I got busy doing other work that we were busy with on the analytics side of what we do. And I came back to this and I'm like, we're still here. Like we're still kettled. We're still having these same conversations. Illegality is illegality. Terrible values are terrible values. And we're still arguing about what's good for Ontarians. We're still arguing about the truth and facts. And the one thing that people keep asking me, and I get that, I don't know, you probably get this all the time. By the way, Dave Moscrop, our guest, and Too Dumb for Democracy, name of the book. It is a fantastic read, kind of touches on a lot of the different stuff we're talking about here. But, and your Substack is phenomenal as well. I read it all the time.
And returning some cash. Let me just tell you, it's been a boon, because now people like me can just go and say whatever we want whenever we want.
Yeah.
And it's nice, but exhausting, as you mentioned. It catches up with you.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is you have people now in my life. I'm sure you do, because people know who you are and love what you do. Going, can you just like shortcut who I should be listening to and who I shouldn't? Can you just tell me? Like, is it Axios? Like if I was to ask Dave Moscrop, Dave, you have a list of sources that you trust. What are those sources? Who are those people?
Yeah, I do. And it's always dependent on what the issue is, what the jurisdiction is, and who the reporters are. I mean, you do this job long enough, and it isn't even a list of outlets necessarily, but a list of people.
Yeah.
Right. So if I want
Brian Lilly right at the top.
Right.
Lori Goldstein.
Every day I wake up and I want to know what Brian knows.
Because then you'll know what his girlfriend knows and what her boss knows. Yeah. Exactly.
Actually, my favorite person to kind of like, not hate. I was gonna say hate follow, but it's not even hate. It's sort of like the equivalent of a nature documentary. I feel like David Attenborough a little bit. It's Joe Warmington. I just want to watch Joe Warmington be in the world, because I certainly don't hate him.
Yeah,
I think he's such a buffoon. And I think fundamentally he's actually probably a decent guy.
Yeah.
But I also think he's a buffoon. And I just want to watch him be in the world. But I would love to sit down with Brian Lilly someday and just talk to him about how he thinks about things.
Or what he's told to think about things.
Well, I just wonder, like, because I know what my process is to come up with a piece or to make an argument.
Yeah.
I want to know what his is, but needless to say, he's not one of the folks I pay close attention to when I want to learn things. But if you say like the Green Belt, I will go and read Fatima. I'll go and read Emma McIntosh. I will go read Colin DeMello. Richard Southern was covering it.
Richard's great.
Was doing really good work. Sean,
I like how Richard tries to remain formless too in his conversations, where he's like, "This is what he said." What do you think?
Yeah, because I mean, this is like old school playing it straight. I mean, so I really trust those folks on that. On lefty stuff, I mean, I write for Jacobin, but I read Jacobin a lot. I read Ricochet. I read the Maple. Actually, like U.S. stuff. I spend most of my time Oh, The Breach is another good lefty Canadian publication.
Mhm.
Though I try to spend as much time going to primary sources as I can. I mean, this is part of my job and part of my time. So I'm going to read reports. I'm going to read transcripts. I'm going to read government news releases. So part of what I'm able to do is spend time doing that. And then that's level one. And then level two is then kind of looking around and saying what people are seeing about it. But then I cast a really wide net for that. And on US stuff, because I only have so much time, I'm basically spending my time with the Washington Post,
Yeah,
Axios,
yeah, good. Yeah.
because that's the Post is a newspaper of record, right? So I know I'm going to get decent stuff. I mean, I've also been written there for a long time, not anymore, but did for a long time.
Well, that's nice of you, even though you're not writing there anymore, to give them big ups because
Oh
it,
yeah,
it
but they
says
do good
something,
work.
right? Yeah,
They
yeah,
do
yeah.
good work, and I again I have no problem. I mean, in Ontario though, again this is a bias because I write for TVO, not at the moment because I'm on strike and solidarity strike with them because they're on strike, but during normal times when management is giving workers a fair deal, which they should do right now, TVO is a great source in Ontario. The Globe and Mail gets a lot of shit, but there's a lot of very, very talented, hardworking Globe and Mail writers. Shannon Proudfoot's having a hell of a moment right now, writing just great pieces that are class conscious, that are very, very smart. I read a lot of her stuff. The Star has, in recent days, been publishing some very, very smart stuff too. I like the newsletters. I read a ton of newsletters. I just signed, I've got Politico's. They've got some great newsletters. I read it every day. And I pay a lot of attention to pollsters. Eric Grenier and Philip Fournier have really great, smart numbers. David Coletto at Abacus, really good, smart stuff.
Yeah.
I made the mistake, of course, of writing about that and criticizing Justin Trudeau a little bit, which created a bit of a day for me.
That's so weird, isn't it? Like whenever you actually are accountable, because there are two schools of thought when you write about like either side of the polls, right? If you write about conservatives or liberals, and if you're actually accountable and you write something about Justin Trudeau where you're like, hey, this is like you're doing a terrible job of this, whether it's communication, whether it's saying, hey, you got to fucking put your hands in the housing stuff here or else we're going to lose. It's amazing the hate you get back from people who say they want a better world.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's wild and it's stunning. And I leveled the most reasonable, gentle critique of the government and just of Trudeau and asked, should he run again? I mean, here are the numbers that we see. Here's what history tells us. Here's the last time someone won 4 elections in a row. Wilfrid Laurier, by the way.
Oh,
more
there's
than
a university named
ago.
after him. I think he's a century ago. I think he's on some money too, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. Remember Cash?
Yeah. You remember that? I used to use it all the time. Had it in my pockets and stuff, and then I'd hand it to somebody. Now it's just like, boop.
It took me a second. He's on the 5, right?
Laurier? Yeah, he might be on the 5. I don't know.
This is what I haven't touched Cash in
Isn't he
so
on
long.
100?
Like I can't.
Is Laurier on it? Let's look it up right now.
So
Laurier
the
on
100
$100
is Borden.
Okay.
Mackenzie King is the 50.
Yeah.
The Queen was the 20.
Chuck's going to be on the
was
next
the
20.
10.
Yeah.
Laurier was the 5.
Laurier is the 5er. Yeah, you're right. Correct.
But yeah, won 4 elections. John A. Macdonald won 4 in a row before him. Also, by the way, crooked as the day was long. Talking about crooked politicians. But I was like, well, I don't know, Trudeau. It's a long shot for Trudeau to come back from these numbers. It's a long shot for him to win 4 in a row. 2 years from now, things may not be better than they are now, or might not be much better. Poilievre's way up in the polls, 12 points in some iterations.
Yeah.
That's a significant thing to come back from. Can he do it? And it was just like, why do you hate Canada, traitor? I didn't even say he shouldn't run. In fact, I expressly said he might be the best hope they have. Like that's probably the logic, right?
Well, they don't read the nice stuff, right? Like I remember when I was talking to Michael Geist about
like, shut up and play the hits. It's like go
I don't read you for unbiased shit.
Go tell Ford to resign. Say the line, Bart.
Play the hits, David. And you're like, I'm not a peasant dispenser of commie stuff. Relax, everybody.
I'm side 1, disc 1, Steely Dan.
But it's a fascinating discussion because like you can't win in certain regards, and it's one of the things everybody gets so angry about is like, well, the alt-right is this or the alt-right is that. Dude, I've had a lot of experiences with the alt-left that have left me going, yeah, I don't like anybody on either side of those.
I call them the alt-center. They're the
The alt center, alt middle.
They're the alt middle. They're the alt middle. I mean, it is.
We should
They
get
are.
shirts.
It's it's the yacht rock crowd, and like what? I mean, here's the thing. I am a proper leftist, a socialist leftist.
What does that mean? Just define proper leftist, David Moscrop.
So if you, I'm going to
Because
do like
these are pejorative terms you're using. I remind you.
well, I hate myself, but not because I'm a leftist.
Okay, good.
I'm going to do poli-sci 101 here.
All right, please. Yeah.
This is super oversimplified, but
it's very much needed.
you'll
right
get
now.
you'll get the general idea.
Right.
If you believe a political spectrum that runs from a left to right with a center, and the idea is, the right wants things to go slow, they want to stay the same, they're very pro-business. That's the traditional conception of a right. The left is they want lots of government intervention, they want social programs, they want change, lots of change, big structural change. And then the middle is like a little bit of both. The Liberal Party in this country tends to be business friendly, market friendly, centering on individual rights, and believes in somewhat of a welfare state. Not a super robust one. It depends on the prime minister at the time, but it believes in somewhat of a welfare state. But they're still a business friendly centrist party. They don't want big structural market change. That is, to me, not left. That's center. Now you can have left liberals, right liberals. Bill Morneau is a right-wing liberal. Nate Erskine-Smith is a left-wing liberal, but they're liberals. They agree on the big fundamental stuff at the end of the day. The proper left, the socialist left, believes in big economic structural change such that the means of production, the stuff with which we make stuff, ought to be democratized. It ought to belong to the community at large rather than private interests. It ought to belong to the workers who own the businesses, for instance, that they run, or the community. And there ought to be more state enterprises running certain industries and
Equity.
Equity in search of equality, or straight up equality, and that the core of socialism is the public ownership of the means of production and the equitable distribution of the goods that we produce and the resources that we produce and own. The liberals are nowhere near that, and certainly the conservatives aren't. But so when I think of the proper left, that's the left I'm thinking of. And of course, on top of that, there's a question of, okay, well, welfare state, like, what do we do for Medicare, pharmacare, dental care, child care? Some liberals are for that in the center. The left obviously wants a much bigger welfare state that's compatible with both socialism and capitalism. But the fundamental socialist distinction is who owns the means of production, who owns the businesses, who controls the stuff, and where it goes.
Who controls the things, the supply chains, all that stuff.
Everything.
Yeah.
And who, and I'm what I won't get into all of this because it's going to bore everybody, but I'm what they call a market socialist. And that means I believe in the power of markets to some extent. And I do believe there is a role for free markets in societies. To the extent that things are owned, I want them to be owned as much as possible by the workers who run the businesses, who do the real work, and produce the real value.
Yeah.
You go down to a restaurant. I would love that restaurant to be owned by the servers and the hostess and the kitchen staff and the bar back folks. I want them to own that restaurant. I want Taylor Guitar was recently sold to its employees. I want a guitar factory that's run and owned by the people who are out there making the guitars. I love that. I think that's great. And one of the reasons I like this is that I like the idea of a market that is responsive to needs, but I also don't want the stuff that's produced to go get concentrated in the hands of a few rich folks who have their own interests, but not the interests of the many at heart. And I don't want to see power pool in the hands of the few. And wherever money pools, power pools, and when power pools, money pools. And so I wanted to have that distribution. I don't want a big Soviet-style communist state because I distrust the concentration of power in that state. We've seen where that
the
goes.
concentration of the power just reverts back to, as we're watching in Russia, right? Reverts back to oligarchy. We see it here a little bit too. Everything goes to fascism at that point.
It becomes authoritarian and oligarchical, but that happens under capitalism too. The United States is an oligarchy. There was data, political science data on this recently that said like the vast majority of laws that are passed. This was a Gillens and Page piece from about 10 years ago, now a little bit more, but it's around the mark. The vast majority of laws that are passed in the interest of the wealthy.
Mm.
And wealth concentration in the United States is high. It's effectively an oligarchy. And The Onion, the best definition of democracy I've ever come across was from The Onion, America's finest news source. And it defined democracy as a moderately representative plutocracy, which is very, and a
Clever.
plutocracy is ruled by the rich.
Yeah.
And that's very funny to me because it's very true.
Yeah.
But so, and so I think of that as the proper left. And so I get smeared by the left sometimes as a liberal, and I get smeared by the right as a communist. And I've spent my days going around like, actually, I'm a market socialist, but I don't do that because I don't have time. I'm like, I'm not going to go around being like, actually, I'm a market socialist. I'm just going to go play video games or go for a walk with the dog, because I'm not going to fight. But there is a real debate to be had about what the structural change we want to see in this country ought to be. But we can't have it because Pierre Poilievre is out calling Trudeau a Marxist.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, so we're going to talk about this stupid bullshit instead of talking about who should own what in this country and where the distribution of wealth should go.
Did you see that video? You see the video of Poilievre walking up? Disgusto. Like, what do you make of it? I'll get it for you. I want your thoughts. I want your thoughts on Pierre Poilievre walking up to a woman's house, campaign style. We're not even campaigning. And
he is
telling this old, well, I know he is, and he's not supposed to be, but whatever. I mean, there are no rules anymore in Canada, apparently. So
well, he's allowed to do, like, you're allowed to door knock anytime. And I mean, this is the problem, is that there are election rules for the election period that are distinct from non-election periods. But now we're in a permanent election. Now all parties at all times are thinking about and preparing for the election. This was true in the United States a few years ago. It became known as the permanent election. That started up in kind of the 90s. It became a feature. It's here in Canada now. We're just always during election period.
I used to be really happy about that too when I was younger. Like, I watch Americans like campaign for 2 years, and I'm like, it's got to be fucking exhausting, like doing that for 2 years. And I was really happy. It was like 2-3 months here in Canada. I'm like, just a quick spin through it. But we've been watching campaigning now for 2 years. This really has pushed into not even American style politics. We're looking at American politics in Canada, which has been an embarrassment to the south of us for quite some time.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. Here's the video. I'm going to get the video up for you because this is incredible. But first, what is Marxism?
Right. So, at its most basic, this is
because
like,
I read about it yesterday, and I feel slightly Marxist today.
I think everyone who thinks about it for a second is slightly Marxist. Marxist is a political, social, and economic theory, philosophy, if you prefer, that critiques capitalism, that is grounded in materialism, the idea that history moves through materialist interests, fundamental stuff of resources, of who gets what, when, and how, and then recommends a form of socialism instead of capitalism. And again, socialism is this ownership of the means of production by the community at large rather than private interests. And at its heart, that's sort of what Marxism is. Again, there's lots of, if you look over I guess on your side, it's a different side, but these are my Marxist books. There's a lot, obviously it goes a lot deeper, but that's the fundamental thing. It's a
Aren't you afraid to be calling a Marxist asshole just by holding that book up, your Marxist book? Like, is there any fear in you, or some guys like, oh, Moscrop is a common Marxist?
Oh no, I get that all the time. I mean, the people, no, I get that all the time. I don't care. Same difference to me. Yeah. But I find the critiques I get from the left to be far more, not upsetting, but I take them far more seriously. Yeah. Oh no, I just take them more seriously when someone from the left critiques me than someone who wants to come call me a communist. The left is like, well, you're too much of a liberal. Then I'll start to think, oh, is that true? Rather than the right wing saying like, yeah, you're a commie scumbag. I'm like, that doesn't bother me. I'd much rather be called a communist than a liberal. Yeah, even though I'm neither. But we think of Marxism in a popular sense as the Soviet Union, which was Marxist. Well, it depends on the period, but it was initially kind of Marxist-Leninist when there was a vanguard of the proletariat. The proletariat's going to lead this revolution, and the workers are going to there's going to be a worker uprising, and the workers are going to overthrow the capitalist government. the bourgeoisie, and they're going to install a government by the workers and for the workers, by the many for the many. In Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution, Lenin came along and it was Marxist Leninist, and there was a vanguard of the proletariat, which is the Marxist Leninists, the Communist Party, who were going to lead that process, and they were meant to melt away. They never did melt
Kind
away.
of hung in there and morphed into something
They
else.
stuck
didn't
around, and they became a ruling class
Yeah.
of their own, the same sort of ruling class that, in some ways, they critiqued from imperial Russia.
Some of these ideologies are like Trojan horses, right?
For
For a
powerful
lot of
folks.
people. Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah,
really
and that's
feels
why
like-
this is part of the reason when I advocate for market socialism, I want the distribution of power, because I don't want there to be a powerful ruling class
Mhm.
across any ideology, because I think that's how workers and day-to-day folks end up getting oppressed. And
Yeah.
you've seen it happen in communist states. You've seen it happen in capitalist states. And frankly, I think the fact that we're still, I mean, and Marxists, proper Marxists, will hate me saying this, but I do think there's a more complicated debate to have than like capitalism versus communism, like this was the 1950s and the Cold War.
Those are your only two choices, because people were like, nah, this is the way it's got to be, because we get to control the entire narrative, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of, especially Nordic socialists, look and say, no, which is like Northern European, Scandinavian socialists, I can say, no, we can balance these different things. Keep in mind that Marx believed, incidentally, that automation was critical to liberating human beings. Like the more we automate, the more free people will be, because workers won't have to spend all their time toiling in these jobs.
Mhm.
The robots will do the work. I wrote a piece a few years ago called "Will the Robots Set Us Free?" And it turns out the answer is no. When the capitalists own the robots,
No bueno.
they don't set you free, right? And
They figure out a
so,
way to get you for cheap or to push you to the side. That's what they
yeah,
do.
and to keep
Yeah.
your labor super cheap. But it's the same reason that Canada has a temporary foreign worker program. Incidentally, is like to depress wages, right?
Mhm.
And automation is meant to depress wages and to discipline workers. So, but the fact is, we have produced remarkable technologies in the marketplace. Incidentally, largely supported by government. It wasn't a fully free market. There's governments that are underwriting a lot of these investments and investing with contracts and tax breaks and guarantees for companies. But so we're socially producing these things. But the fact is, we have produced a lot of important automation that could be used to liberate people, but it's used to oppress them instead. But those are the debates I really want to have, instead of, is Justin Trudeau a Marxist? But then we have to have these stupid debates instead, because they're good for getting dummies to vote for you.
Well, you have to identify, like, that's the thing, is if you want to have a debate about what Marxism is, or real proper socialism is, or market socialism is, you have to get it out of the minds of people that these are swear words, right? Like you've
Big
got
time.
to like, and that's what I see. I want to play this clip for you. This is Pierre Poilievre and Jamil Jivani, former broadcaster, which, by the way, when you lose your job in radio, television, or print, you get hustled into politics. It's what everybody does. It's hilarious. Everybody's been asked. It's just a ridiculous notion that a politician should be someone that actually has values and virtues. People in traditional media, by and large, very few do. Anyway, this is Jamil Jivani, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative, going to Peggy's house. I believe this was staged. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I have no idea.
With your MP, your old MP coming from Peterborough, Michelle Ferrari.
Oh my
You know-
God.
oh yeah, the MP that likes to get hammered in the bathtub and do videos, really cool videos. So this is her feed. You didn't know that? You didn't know this was your? You didn't know this?
Well,
was-
I know Ferrari. Didn't she say something about having like several kids? Was that her?
Yeah, she had several kids. Yeah, and it was like, where are the kids? She's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Can't tell.
She's just a partisan attack dog. Peterborough has a bit of a history in recent years of
Yeah.
having just absolute dullard MPs. You'll recall that prior to her, Dean Del Mastro was Peterborough's MP.
Oh, he was
we
awesome.
all know what happened to Dean Del Mastro, the deaner. It's
The
very
deaner.
sad though, because when I was growing up, Peter Adams was the MP in Peterborough, a liberal, and he was extraordinarily talented, smart, nice man. I worked with him on things. But now we get well, we're about to see what we get now.
Well, yeah. This is let's watch it together. This is Pierre Poilievre and Michelle Ferreri, and somebody also saying, "Hey, Marxism's bad, and Justin Trudeau and his dad are Marxists." Watch this.
Yeah. Oh, Colby. So here he comes. I told you, this is Mr. Pierre Poilievre, your next prime minister. Give him what you got to tell him, Peggy.
Tell me, Peggy.
Oh, I think his dad started putting this country down, and he's going to put it and fight and put the nail in the coffin.
Not if we can help it.
His dad started it a long time ago.
Well, they're both Marxists.
Your face. You should see your face.
I
Both Marxists. First of all, Peggy just knows that word to be that's bad. Second of all, what the fuck was that? Like, who the fuck does that?
You know what really bothers me about this, I mean, at its core, is that if you go and read Marx, or go and read A Beginner's Guide to Marx, I've got one up there. Marx is as fresh today in many ways as he was in the 19th century. And Marxism speaks to a lot of the alienation and the frustration and the anger of people who feel like they're getting screwed by the system and that they're being exploited. And it's probably people like Peggy, but they've been radicalized away from their own interests. And so every time they go and shake Pierre Poilievre's hand and watch him smugly say, you know, Pierre Trudeau, who, by the way, was a consummate liberal, and Justin Trudeau are Marxists, kills the working class a little bit more. The same working class that Pierre Poilievre pretends to care about, who goes around and gives lip service to. But the answer to this can't be, oh, you got to go read Marx. And this is where the left needs to get its shit together. We can't go to the Peggies of the world and say, well, actually, Justin Trudeau is not a Marxist. It's true he's not, but that's not going to get us anything. You need to go read Marx.
She's not reading Marx.
But the vast majority of people aren't going to read Marx. They don't have time for that shit. The left has a real job to do here at connecting to the Peggies of the world and winning workers back over to their movement, to say that we're here for workers. We want you to have a safe working environment. We want you to have a stable job. We want you to have enough money to put your kids through school, to own a house, to own a car, to go out to a restaurant, to enjoy life a little bit. That's what we're about. That's first and foremost what we want. This side is going to go, they're going to gut government. They're going to gut your health care. They're going to gut your pension. They're not going to give you dental care. They're not going to give you child care. They're going to leave you to struggle on your own. And when things go pear-shaped, and they will, they're going to be nowhere to be seen. We're going to be here the whole time. We're going to make sure that you get through this, and we're going to get through it together, because the things that we build together stay built longer, stay built better. And when your life goes a little bit sideways, as it often does, we're going to be here for you, because that's what we're about. But the left has lost this message. They've lost the capacity to reach working class folks largely, and they got to win that back. And the NDP are certainly trying to do that. They've had sort of mixed results, but that's got to be the fundamental goal. I haven't seen sufficient progress on that. In fact, in some ways, the left is losing the narrative to Poilievre and to this nonsense, and the internet is certainly helping, because of the grifting bozos we talked about earlier. And until we can get back to the working class, we're going to be stuck having stupid debates about whether or not Justin Trudeau is a Marxist, instead of talking about how we can actually support people to get them through the day, and more to get them through the day, ultimately to get to a point where they can not just survive but flourish. That's what I would like to see, and certainly that's my personal project as a writer.
I can't see anybody arguing with anything you just said that doesn't have nefarious expectations. Like what you're talking about is giving power to people for the work that they've done, educating people, being kind to people, trying to educate individuals as to the pejoratives that have been drilled into their heads by the internet over a long period of time, reaching out. But I don't hold out, and wonderful for you to say, I don't hold out a ton of hope that, again, going back to what Max Fawcett said, anybody shares any of those values if you align on either side of those poles, right? Like I just, and it's sad to say, but it absolutely takes all the wind out of my sails, when you log on to Twitter, and I know Twitter is a very different place, or when you have a conversation with someone who's a friend of yours, right, who you've known for a long period of time, and they repeat these things, and you're like, I get to the point, I don't know about you, But I get to the point sometimes where I'm like, man, am I smarter than everybody, or is everybody just stupid? Because it seems like a pretty easy race to run, educating people, helping people build better, giving them agency over their life as taxpayers and individuals, straightening out healthcare, figuring out a way to get free market to work for the people. What you're talking about seems to be a really great solution. But the fact that anybody stands against that and is able to come up with a narrative that somehow makes sense to the odd person that has an IQ just above a kumquat, I don't understand how they continue to fight against doing better for the people in this country. Like, that's the part I don't understand.
I think some of them I think some of them truly believe on the right that freedom is having no government or having very, very little government. And freedom is you having more money in your pocket, and instead of spending that money on healthcare or spending that money on dental care or childcare. And they fundamentally value individual liberty in the negative sense of not being stopped from doing things, rather than the positive sense of being given opportunities through collectively derived wealth being shared. And I think they fundamentally believe that. And I think history and data disproves a lot of what they believe. We know that trickle down economics doesn't trickle down. We have decades of data to prove that. The Reagan era, Thatcher era economics of like, if you cut regulations and let the market do its thing, eventually folks at the bottom will do better. No, they're going to die of black lung. That's what's going to happen to the folks at the bottom. And the money's going to filter up to the top, and then some rich asshole is going to go hoard it in the Seychelles.
Don't worry, we'll get you later. We'll get you later. That's my favorite one. Don't worry, we'll take care of that.
It's coming. It's coming. It's always just around the corner, but it's never actually shows up. And that's not to say that living standards haven't improved, but it's to say that the vast majority of that wealth is being concentrated in the hands of the few who get to set the rules and give you table scraps. And that's what we're fighting over. And so I do think people will fundamentally believe that. I just think they're wrong. And they're right in the sense that I'm nervous about government controlling too much of what I'm allowed to do. I don't want a nanny government, but I want a government that ensures that that the market, when it often fails, doesn't leave people destitute. I want a government that has a role, a significant role in the economy. I will want that complemented by workers who are owning their places of employment, who have power in those places of employment, so that they're not pushed around either by the government or by their bosses and the owners.
Sounds fair.
And that's a nice distribution of power that I would like. But again, I think there's almost no space to have that debate. And we certainly can't have it while we're talking about whether or not Justin Trudeau is a Marxist. And we probably can't have it while people are like, okay, I'm very keen to talk about that, and I kind of see how it can affect day-to-day stuff, and even my concerns about housing, but like, I got to pay my rent this month. I don't know how it's going to happen. So we can't talk about Marx right now. I need to pay my rent. And I really, really get that. I really, really do.
Me too. Me too. Me too. You know what? And it's like, it's going to take a whole bunch of people coming in the middle and sacrificing some of their privilege who don't get it, right? Who don't get what it's like to pay rent. And we don't get what it's like to struggle.
Yeah, and we could, what really gets me, and I wrote about this in my book, we've created an environment that is uniquely hostile to doing better politics. The way we run our elections, the way we run our legislature, the way social media works, the way news media works, television, newspapers, podcasts, the way the economy works, they're all set up to make us want to battle each other, to treat the world like Thunderdome, and to treat everything like it's a zero-sum game.
Sort of like the culture war we're being forced to fight when we should be fighting a class war against very few people to take away their power.
Yeah, 100 bang on.
Yeah.
And yet we've set up the environment just to tear ourselves apart. I do this thing with an MP called Zoom Happy Hour with Mike Lake, who's a conservative MP in Edmonton.
Oh, I know Mike. Good guy.
He's great. We met because he said something on the internet and I shit talked him, and he responded by saying, "You don't know me or anything about me." And I took a moment to check myself, and I said, "You know what, man? I don't. You're right." We went and met for coffee. We talked hockey because he used to work for the Oilers. And he invited me to the Zoom happy hour, and I have now appeared more often than any other person on those things. And in those spaces, we have constructive, smart conversations across political ideologies about all kinds of things. And when I leave those moments, those Zoom happy hours, they run for about 90 minutes. I think to myself, like, if we did this at scale, we could actually get things done. But then we go to Parliament or to Twitter or to the cable news talking head shows, and then you realize, like, oh no, that we're doing something very different there and much more toxic than the protected space where we're all talking to each other as people.
Yeah.
And it actually makes me deeply, deeply sad to see that what's possible in that space compared to what's actually happening in these other spaces. And I'm thinking about a book right now, about another book that might look at ways we might get a little bit closer to the Zoom happy hour model of doing politics in the world. Not that politics shouldn't be confrontational. Not that there shouldn't be a rough edge around politics, that there often needs to be, because when you try to smooth politics over too much, you end up oppressing people, right? This is why we want protests. This is why we need action in the streets and civil disobedience sometimes. This is why we need to have polemics from time to time. But we're getting all that all the time, and none of the more human-to-human constructive stuff that's focused on building solutions. That's why I'm a deliberative Democrat that believes in creating situations where you sit down with other people, recognize them as equals, and give reasons back and forth for and against things to try to come to some sort of solution that we can all live with. But the incentives right now in the public space, for the most part, are against that, and we're paying the price.
You know what, dude? I have enjoyed this last hour and 16 minutes greatly.
Oh, it flew by.
Yeah.
My dog's just sitting here looking at me, like, what the fuck are you doing? And
where's he posted up? Or behind your chair?
well, it's a she, but she's down. This is little Sam, the one-eyed dingo.
Oh, okay.
She's a little one-eye rescue pup.
Yeah.
And she is the sweetest dog you're ever going to meet in a million years. But so we hang out all day, every day.
You got her how long ago? How long did you get?
So
Sam
she belongs to my partner, and Meg got her, I think, 7 years ago, and so I've just known her for a couple of years now. But
she's your dog now, though, isn't she?
But she's our dog. But I because Meg works at the office a few days a week, I spend a ton of time with her.
She jealous? She jealous now that her dog's like, oh,
no, but I am the softie. Yeah. I'm the like, oh, I gotta buy her another treat. I gotta buy her another toy. Let her up on the bed. I moved in. I had a very nice, expensive couch.
Yeah.
And after a couple months, I'm like, get that dog up on this couch.
Yeah, forget.
She's like tearing apart my. I'm like, who cares?
What are you doing for Labor Day?
Oh, I'm going to a micro cabin. We're going to
like a tiny house,
a tiny cabin called it's this company called Cabinscape. They have a bunch of little cabins throughout Ontario, and so every year we go away for a couple of days, taking the dog, and we're just gonna like play board games and hang out and
just be in the woods,
in a tiny cabin. Yeah, it's gonna be really nice.
Good for you. I thought maybe because you're a card-carrying proper socialist, you might be doing something labor-related this weekend. But good for you for getting.
Fundamentally, Labor Day ought to be a moment for workers to rest.
Yes, it should be. Good. You go rest. Listen, dude, absolutely. Again, enjoyed talking to you. Really appreciate it. Too Dumb for Democracy. It's a definitive book in my life when it comes to understanding how it should work for you, me, and everybody else. David is the author of it. Mark Bory with the forward. Make sure you do yourself a favor and order that online today. Please subscribe to your Substack as well.
Yes, please.
It is definitive stuff too. In my life, it's one of those newsletters. You made mention of it a little earlier. It's one of those newsletters. I'm like, I never miss it. Yours, Amber Max, or about 10 other newsletters. And I'm like, yeah, I need to know what's going on from certain people. To your point, I don't necessarily trust brands. I trust individuals. And if they happen to work for a brand, I'll consume that stuff. But you can go right to the source with David's Substack as well. Too Dumb for Democracy, the book, available anywhere. It's an audio book form as well. Are you the voice of that?
I am brand new.
Did you sex it up a bit? Like, did you slow it down? How you doing? Everybody?
I just did what they told me to do.
Oh, did you really? How long did it take you to read a book, your own book?
You know what? Not that many, not that long. The book comes in at like 7 or 8 hours, maybe 9 hours.
Yeah.
I can't remember how long it actually is, but we did it in I don't know, maybe half a dozen sessions at the most, a little bit
Oh, that's
less.
awesome.
And I, for whatever reason, took to it real fast, and it was a great experience. It was ECW Press; they were wonderful. I'm proud of it. I do hope people read it, and I hope they or listen to it, and I hope they enjoy it.
I'm going to download the audiobook today. Yeah, I've got the
I hope
book, but I'm going to download the audiobook because I
you
just
can
want to
hear me just.
Yeah, I'm going to critique your verbiage. I'm going to critique how you talk. Right? I can't critique your writing, but
Well,
I
this
can
is
critique
your
your
area of expertise.
oration. No, I'm definitely not an expert in this, dude. I just ham and egg it. That's all I do. Thanks for doing this. Where can people find you on Twitter, or where would you like them to find you?
You know what? I'm still hanging in there on Twitter, David_Moscrop. I'm there to the bitter end.
Yeah, me too. I'm not going anywhere.
Mm.
I kind of dig it. I dig it
There are
because I
moments
feel like,
I'm like, yeah.
it's not bad. When there are moments you're like, what?
Well, there's moments where I'm like, this is my community, and I'm not willing to give it up.
Yeah. I just ignore all the fascism and all the Nazism. That's what I do.
You know what I did recently? I muted notifications from anyone who doesn't follow me and anyone with with a default picture on their profile, and my life got 1,000 times better like that.
Oh, seriously? So nobody can see your stuff anymore.
Well,
Or
they
you
can see it.
They can't interact with you.
I think they can. I just don't see it, so they can just have a
it's
chat
awesome.
with themselves.
I have a chat with themselves in the void. I keyworded MAGA this year. It's been a wonderful year. I've keyworded
groomer.
Yeah, groomer. That's another one you can't get. Good to see you, dude. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
All right. David Moscrop, ladies and gentlemen. He's one of my favorites. He should be one of yours as well. David_Moscrop on Twitter or X. That is his beautiful dog, Sam. Book is called Too Dumb for Democracy. Substack for David Moscrop. He's obviously a journalist. He's got his doctorate. I love having him on because he explains things to me because I'm an idiot. That's what we do. I'm just an idiot. I just bring people around that are smarter than me, and I ask them a bunch of questions, and then we ham and egg it, and then boom. There you go. We got it. But thanks to David for joining us, taking time today. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. It is Labor Day weekend. We're finished for the week. We'll be back on Tuesday with Lachlan Cross. We got a busy week. Frankie Graves from Ecos Research is going to take us through some research you need to be aware of, like real unbiased research. So Frankie Graves next week. Have a wonderful day. As always, brought to you by our friends at CanTorque. Go to cantorque.com if you're looking for a torque wrench. It's super easy. It's all you got to do is go to cantorque.com. What are torque wrenches? Loosening and fastening solutions for people that don't have any in the heavy machinery industry, nuclear. Doesn't matter what it is. If you have a bolting need, they have a bolting solution. Hydraulic torque wrenches. They fabricate them, make them, do everything, design them here in Canada. Canadian made. Not many people in that industry can say that. They do business around the world. Colin's the principal. Go to cantorque.com. Get a hold of Colin. He'll help you out. He's a beauty. Also, Gitch. We're brought to you by the greatest underwear on the planet. Pouch in the front, super breathable, barely there fabric, stretchy, absolutely made for every level of performance. And the only place you can get them is edsfineimports.com. Trust me, you will love these Gitch. I love these Gitch. All of my friends have Gitch. My kids wear the Gitch, even though they're adults now. They're not really kids. My adult children wear Gitch. You can too. Just go to edsfineimports.com. You want a free pair? All you got to do is use promo code Gitch and then the number 3. Gitch and then the number 3. And you're off to the races. Ed'll send them to you. Brought to you by Gitch. Engineered for every level of performance. Boxer briefs with the pouch in the front. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. I know I will. I will. You too. And if you're listening to this after Labor Day, have a great week. Whatever. Bye.